a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology on a Tuesday. I wanted to do a video here responding to some criticisms that are, I guess we could call it criticisms, that has come in over the last few weeks or so. This is certainly by no means exhaustive. It's maybe 2% of some of the feedback that I've gotten, the negative feedback. And some of it is, I'm seeing a consistent theme. And so I wanted to respond to it. But I do, you know what? I find it helpful to keep in mind a prayer from the Troparion to the cross whenever responding to this kind of stuff. I actually even find it helpful praying this Troparion every day. Because it's easy to, see people who slander you, speak evil against you, and it's easy to want to feed into that and to get angry and to want to lash back. But at the end of the day, we have to pray for their salvation, their sanctification, and I find this Troparion helpful for me to remember that, to not lash out. And I think that it might be helpful for y'all as well if you also are experiencing slander. We all experience that, in one way or another, whether it is from people who are close to us, family members, friends, or just people on social media who say all kinds of evil against you. Whenever you're simply trying to defend the truth and speak the truth, you'll get criticism, and I'm talking about uncharitable criticism, and you'll get that from a lot of people who profess to be Christians. We can expect to get that kind of criticism from non-Christians. It's a little different when you get it from Christians, because these are people who are supposed to be living a life of virtue and following Christ and imitating him. But we know the sad reality is that many of us are struggling with sin and we fail. And some of us struggle in this area as well, where we cut down others with our words. I know I've been guilty of that. So again, this prayer I find helpful. It's very, very short. In fact, I can put it in the chat for y'all, just in case you want to copy and paste it. And I can also add it to the show description later on. Maybe just keep it in mind daily and pray it daily. So let's pray it. Save, O Lord, and have mercy on them that hate me and wrong me and make temptation for me, and let them not perish because of me, a sinner. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Like I said, it's very short, but you know what? It gets to the point, and it reminds us, have mercy on those people who hate us, who wrong us, who don't give us what is owed to us, but misrepresent us, and let them not perish because of us, a sinner, right? That part is really convicting, because it could be that somebody wrongs you and they say something wrong about you and they're uncharitable. The problem is, if you lash out and you return evil for evil, guess what? You just confirmed them in their evil. And you don't want to lead that person even further away from Christ by giving them a reason to continue to be that way. In a sense, what you're doing at that point is you're letting them perish because of you, because of your reaction. You're giving them an excuse to continue in that behavior. Not that it's justified, but I think you understand what I'm saying. They're not seeing the error of their ways when we respond like that. So I think that that's a helpful prayer to keep in mind on a daily basis if you experience these things. With that in mind, I want to maybe charitably interact with some of the unfair criticism that I've seen. Let's maybe start out light Let's not just dive into the more disturbing content. Maybe I'll just leave some of that stuff out. But, something that I've seen very often in criticism here is that people will say, but look, Michael, you go to an Eastern liturgy instead of the Novus Ordo. So what people are saying is, look, you're criticizing some people in the TLM community and saying that the Novus Ordo is not inherently evil, but you yourself don't go to a Novus Ordo. That's the argument. What's implied here, and sometimes people will make it explicit, the accusation is that you don't go to a Novus Ordo because you don't believe what you're actually saying. So you're telling us that the Novus Ordo is not inherently evil, according to the rubrics, but you don't believe that because you don't go to the Novus Ordo. That's the accusation. That's what's sometimes implied, but that's also what is made explicit in some cases by some commenters, because like I said, this one comes up all the time. Well, the problem with that criticism is that I have been saying this about the Novus Ordo even when I was going to the Novus Ordo. And I've been making these criticisms about some people in the TLM community even when I was going to the Novus Ordo. So in other words, I'm not being inconsistent. I was making these same arguments when I was going to a Roman Rite liturgy. The reason why I'm Eastern Rite isn't because I think that the Novus Ordo is inherently evil. It's actually for different reasons. I don't think that the Roman Rite idea of withholding communion from infants is ideal. I don't think it's evil. I don't think it's sinful. I don't think that my child would go to hell without the Eucharist, but I do think that there are graces there, and it's important to give the Eucharist to an infant. That's a huge reason for me, among others, but there are not any that would be inconsistent with what I have been saying about criticizing some aspects of the TLM and saying that the Novus Ordo is not evil. It has nothing to do with, one thing has nothing to do with the other, unless you're assuming that I am intentionally misleading people and being inconsistent. And that's not the case. There's no reason to believe that. So again, it boils down to people assuming evil on my part, assuming that I'm inconsistent, when that's not the reason why I go to an Eastern liturgy. So as you can imagine, I have responded a lot to Taylor Marshall and some of the problems with his content, and I will continue to do so, because I continue to see people being impacted negatively by some of the content, and I'm not seeing enough engagement with his content from others. So somebody has to do it. Well, I'm going to do it then, and I'll continue to do it. And people can continue to criticize me for that. It doesn't matter. I'm going to continue to say what needs to be said, period. End of story. It's not going to change. In fact, the more I see hatred, negativity, sinful reactions on part of people whenever I criticize these aspects, and I do so constructively, the more I see that, the more I know, yep, I need to address that more. So I'm going to continue to address it even more, because I'm saying, you know what, I'm hitting a nerve, and I'm uncovering something here that needs to be addressed. Here's one. Taylor is a loyal son of the church. Those who oppose Taylor represent Satan. So that's in reference to me, because I've criticized some aspects of Taylor Marshall's content. I represent Satan. So in the mind of individuals like these, they think unless you're on board with everything Taylor Marshall says, you represent Satan. It's a very simplistic kind of thinking, one that is unable to make distinctions and say, you know what, it's possible to agree with some things that Taylor Marshall says and then criticize some other aspects of what Taylor Marshall says without representing Satan. It's possible to do both. But some people have idolized Taylor Marshall and formed a cult around him to the point that if you criticize him, you're effectively criticizing Christ. They're effectively equating Taylor Marshall and his content with Jesus himself, so that if you oppose him, you're opposing Jesus, therefore you're on the side of Satan. Again, this is a cult mentality that puts an individual above reproach and above criticism. I've even seen people equate him with the Pope in the sense that he's equal in status authoritatively with the Pope. Now, obviously, Taylor Marshall wouldn't agree with that. But I'm just saying some of the people who are following him have that mentality, and it comes out in these kinds of comments. So my rejoinder is, why isn't it, how is it not possible, or is it possible for us to criticize some of the content of Taylor Marshall without representing Satan? And if you think that that's not possible, are you then equating Taylor Marshall and everything he says with Christ? And if so, how does that work? Do you think that he's being personally guided by the Holy Spirit over and against the magisterium? Is that what we're assuming here? So I have to seriously question somebody who has this kind of on and off switch. Either you're totally on board with Taylor Marshall or you're on board with Satan. There needs to be some balance there. Okay, so another one, I'm just going down the list. I'm fed up with the Novus Ordo and being drawn to the traditional Latin Mass. What is up with your obsession with radical traditionalism? What is a Rad Trad anyway? Some milquetoast thing? Okay. Well, look, I totally understand that somebody might be fed up with bad Novus Ordos. The Novus Ordo celebrated incorrectly in an abusive way. I understand that. And you know what? I don't fault if all you have is bad Novus Ordos in your area, or a TLM, and this is a TLM in communion with the Pope. I don't fault you for going to the TLM. I'd probably be right there with you. That's not my concern. So I don't know why anybody would think that that's somehow something that I don't understand and wouldn't sympathize with. I think I've made that abundantly clear. But what is up with your obsession with radical traditionalism? So if one criticizes something consistently or even frequently, it's an obsession to this commenter. I don't know. Was Cyril of Alexandria obsessed with Nestorius because he criticized Nestorius pretty frequently? Is that an obsession? Or is it that you see that there's a need to criticize something that is harmfully impacting people, and you don't see others really engaging it? So it's kind of like nobody else is doing it, so I guess I need to address it. And you see it's continuing to harm people, and there's more and more content that's coming out that's harming people. Responding to that is obsession. Why would that be obsession? Why wouldn't we say, well, you know what, responding to this is out of love for Christ? Could it be that? Why do we automatically assume it's obsession and use pejorative terms like this? The individual asks, what is a Rad Trad anyway? Some milquetoast thing. I've heard people use the term milquetoast before, but I've never heard anybody equate the use of the term Rad Trad with a milquetoast thing, as the commenter asks. But in response to the question, what is a radical traditionalist? It would be a person that clinges to certain forms of the liturgy over and against the magisterium. An individual also who tends to think that they're in line with sacred tradition, and in fact, they're opposing sacred tradition. And they're confusing certain ecclesial traditions with sacred tradition itself. That's how I would define a Rad Trad. I think I've been pretty clear on what a radical traditionalist is. But just in case I haven't been, there it is. Okay, so here's another one. You got a beef against Dr. Taylor Marshall. Why not call him out to your channel and have it out with him? I don't got a beef with Taylor Marshall. I have some concerns about some of the things that he's saying and where it leads people. And so whenever I criticize him or someone else and some of their content, it's not because I got a beef with them. It's because I'm seeing that there's some problems in their content. And I'm also seeing the effect that it has on souls, because those souls contact me very often and say, here's what happens to me, or here's what happened to me, and here's where this led me. And I really appreciate your content because it's helped bring me out of that. And again, I've seen the effects that it has on others, as well as I've experienced it myself. So it's not a question of having a beef against somebody. It's a question of, is some of this content leading people away from Christ and his church? That's my concern. So then the second part was, why not call him out to your channel and have it out with him? Well, with all due respect, sir, are you really under the impression that Taylor Marshall has dialogues with people who oppose his views? Have you seen any such videos and conversations on YouTube? Are you under the impression that he responds to people, even privately, who critique him? Are you aware that I'm known pretty well for having discussions with people that disagree with me on my channel? I would say maybe consider that. Let's go on to the next one. Let's see here. Oh, here's an interesting one. So one person commented, can someone point me to a video of yours about James Martin leading the schism? And this was in response to me doing a video again about asking whether or not some of the content of Taylor Marshall leads to schism. One of the individuals says, can you point me to a video about James Martin leading the schism? Evidently, the person didn't bother to check to see that I had just done a video about Father James Martin just a few days prior to that video. And I even offered some criticisms that's more severe of just content leading the schism. So my question is, why offer comments like that without it even bothering to check to see if I've done such things? Moreover, what if I haven't done a video on Father James Martin? Does that take away from anything that I've said? No, but I have. But stuff like that is pretty often. I get it pretty often. Like I had another commenter say the same thing, but why don't you do a video criticizing Pope Francis on this or that? When literally just a few days prior to that commenter, I did a video charitably criticizing some of the actions of Pope Francis on that very matter. Again, didn't even bother to check. For some reason, they think in their mind that I just haven't, and that is a sufficient rejoinder to my criticisms. It's certainly not. It's not interacting and engaging my content at all. Frankly, to date, I have not seen any legitimate or meaningful interaction with any of my criticisms in this area. I just haven't. I've seen a lot of detraction. Well, not necessarily detraction, slander, calumny. I've seen a lot of hate. I've seen a lot of deflection. I've seen a lot of irrelevant arguments that just don't apply to me. But actually engaging my criticism, you know what? I haven't seen anything meaningful there. So here's another one. This guy is an ignorant jerk with his green screen of books behind him to make him look intelligent. There goes the green screen thing again. So my question is, all right, obviously this isn't a green screen. It's real. I've adjusted it. I mean, notice the reflection here in the background. You'll notice right there, I just moved an internet browser off of my screen, and it the lights above my head adjusted. You'll notice that. That's because this is not a green screen and it's reflecting my computer screen. It's an absurd claim, but let's say that it was a green screen. What does that mean? People who use a green screen, they're not actually intelligent? I'm just curious here if that's so. I mean, I have seen some intelligent people use a green screen. The use of a green screen, does that mean they're not intelligent? So here's something. Lofton admits that his attackers are detractors, meaning they are telling the truth, exposed. No, that's why I corrected myself and said no slander, because detraction would mean that they're revealing a hidden fault, a private fault, and that's why I corrected myself. So I don't know, Eben, for if you're being serious or if that's a joke. Maybe can you clarify? Okay, joke, by the way. But you know what, Eben, for do you know how often I've seen that kind of absurd thinking? You can't even tell these days if it's a joke, because a lot of people have that kind of bad will and evil suspicion. He said, I thought all caps would have made it clear. No, it wouldn't. There's a lot of people who have that kind of evil suspicion, and they would put it in all caps to emphasize it. Maybe Eben 4. I think that you're unaware of how bad the situation actually is. But an ignorant jerk. Okay, so what if I am ignorant? Does that take away from any of the criticisms that I've offered? Maybe I am a jerk. Does that take away from any of the criticisms I've offered? And then again, how do comments like these build up the body of Christ? How do comments like these reflect that Christ is in your heart? And how do comments like these really meaningfully engage and interact with the content of what I've said? They just don't. Oh, this was interesting. On one of my videos, one of the commenters said, absolutely zero to do with teaching with authority. This is far off. You don't even know what it means to teach with authority, and you lead others astray. May God punish you for your lies and false teachings. So this person is accusing me of not understanding what the magisterium is and knowing when the magisterium teaches with authority. That's interesting. Given that's the area I really have devoted my entire life to at this point. I can't say that I know everything about the magisterium. I'll spend the rest of my life, trying to learn as much as I can. But I think I know the very basics on when the church teaches with authority. And I don't see anything in this comment responding to anything that I've said on why I'm ignorant. But the individual claims I lead others astray. Is that the case? Or is it people who actually don't understand teaching authority that are leading people astray? People who think that if you disagree with something Pius XII says, that equals heresy. That would be an example of somebody who doesn't know what teaching authority is. And y'all know who I'm talking about. He says, may God punish you for your lies and false teaching. Well, is that the way you should be responding as a Christian? Asking for God to punish people for their lies, assuming that they're lies and false teachings? Or should you rather not pray for their repentance? I'll tell you this. If I have disseminated lies and false teachings, I would not know it from your comment, because you haven't shown me what is a false teaching or a lie on my part, nor have you shown me a way that reflects Christ. So even if what you say is true, I would never know repentance, and I would never know Christ from you. Not from what you've shown me. Maybe that will change. Maybe you'll repent, and maybe you'll start to reflect Christ in your behavior. But if I'm led astray, if I am fallen away from the ways of Christ, I wouldn't know it from your behavior. And that says something. And if people can say that about us, right, that they wouldn't see Christ because because of our behavior, that means we need to repent. That means we need to, we need to start making some changes here. And I know I haven't always shown Christ in my behavior, so I'm certainly holding myself to that criticism. Sometimes I've been right, in an argument or something like that, but I did it in such a way that a person wouldn't know. They wouldn't see Christ because of my behavior. Even though I was right in what I was saying, I said it in such a way that they would never know that they're wrong because my behavior was a stumbling block to them. And that's convicting. We got to work on that. Okay, so here's another one. Meanwhile, millions of souls are lost to apostasy and sin while you inject nuance into a non-issue because of toxicity and feelies. So I'm injecting nuance into a non-issue. I beg to differ. I'm trying to, first of all, address things, yes, from a nuanced perspective, but offer criticisms about things that leads people away from Christ and leads them into schism. And you say millions of souls are lost to apostasy because of some of the things I'm criticizing. So, and then the person says that I'm criticizing these things because of toxicity and feelings or feelies. No, I'm not doing it because of toxicity in and of itself, although I do point out that some people are very toxic. But that's not my biggest concern. My bigger concern is the teachings they're disseminating. I really do think that they could lead people away from Christ. That's my bigger concern. Feelies, I have no idea what you're talking about, so I can't address that. You're essentially punching backwards instead of facing the wreckage in front of you. Well, I think that that's not the case. I've faced the wreckage or the crisis of the situation to an extent that I don't think most of these detractors, or again, let me correct myself, most of these slanderers have ever considered. I'm aware of all these arguments. All of the stuff that you're hearing from the radical traditionalists, I used to make these same arguments. They're nothing new. None of these guys are coming up with new content. This stuff has been circulating for a very long time. It's the same arguments recirculated. And you'll notice a lot of it is the same misinformation recirculated. I'm aware of these things, and I'm also aware of where the crisis really is in the church. And it's all around. We certainly have a crisis, but I'm not trying to punch backwards. I'm trying to consistently address the crisis in the church everywhere. Not just with the liberals, but also with a radical traditionalist solution. I think that's also just as problematic as the liberals. Let's see. For someone who eschews the echo chambers of rigid traditionalism, you are interested only in people gassing you up in the comments. Upon what basis do you make such a slanderous accusation would be my question. How do you know what my interests are? Interesting, a modernist defender that at the same time loves tradition. I wonder if your opinion will change when they start coming after the Eastern Rite, and they spelled Rite, R-I-G-H-T. Okay, let's deal with the first part. So I'm a modernist defender that at the same time loves tradition. I get this accusation hourly. It's nonstop that I'm a modernist. Curiously, I don't think people who use this term actually know what modernism is. They couldn't tell you anything about Loisy or Tyrrell or Pius X and what he was dealing with and what historical modernism actually is and how people today might compare or be contrasted with modernism. Couldn't tell you a single thing about it. Although I've studied modernism in great detail, so I can tell you a whole lot about modernism. And I could say that what people are guilty of today often is not modernism. I might call it neo-modernism. It's not the same thing as what Pius X was dealing with in the turn of the 20th century. though there are some similarities, but it's not the same. But it seems that the slander modernism is just a catchword these days for you're saying something I disagree with, therefore I'm going to label you a modernist. Well, I want to say when you use that, you automatically lose credibility in my eyes because you're showing me you don't know what a modernist is. And it seems like there's some cognitive dissonance on part of the commenter because they say I'm a modernist, but then they're confused that I love tradition. Yeah, that should maybe raise some red flags for you. Maybe I'm not actually a modernist. If I love tradition, maybe you have a misunderstanding what modernism is, and maybe it's you who is confused. The person says, I wonder if your opinion will change when they start coming after the Eastern Rite, R-I-G-H-T. I've been very consistent in my criticisms of Eastern Catholics who, likewise, some Eastern Catholics are perhaps unintentionally in dissent from the magisterium, and I have also consistently criticized them. And I hold, again, Eastern Catholics to the exact same standard that I hold Roman Rite Catholics. So none of this changes anything. Moreover, there have been attempts on part of the Holy See to treat the Eastern Catholic churches unjustly, and I've been consistent in my response to that. So this is not only something that I've taken into account, I'm very consistent with it, and it doesn't change anything that I've said. So rather than deflect and go down a road that doesn't actually engage my content, maybe actually engage my content next time. Here's another one. We shouldn't mix the races. That was it. That was the comment left on my channel. Pretty often I get stuff like this. Racist comments. What is it with some radical traditionalists and racism? And evidently the comment was just because I have an intro with somebody who is black who does the voiceover for my video. For them, that's mixing the races. I don't see how that's mixing the races, but you know what? It's actually not bad to have interracial marriages. The only time interracial marriage has ever been forbidden by God was between a believer and not a believer. And usually that was associated with believers being the race of the Jews and non-believers being Gentiles. So that's why God discouraged it in the Old Testament, but it wasn't absolute. Moses' wife was black, for example. So the problem wasn't an issue of race per se, ethnicity per se. The issue was not mingling believers of the one true God with non-believers. I'm sad I actually have to say that. As somebody who would profess to be a traditionalist, you should know that. So maybe check your heart. It sounds like you have some hatred in your heart. Here's another one. Why do you treat Orthodox and Protestants less critically than you do Rad Trads? I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. I've been pretty consistently critical of some aspects of Eastern Orthodoxy and Protestantism. But I think I understand where you're coming from here. I think I understand. I think that the problem is some aspects of radical traditionalism are more pernicious than Orthodoxy and Protestantism, because in some ways radical traditionalists are closer to the Catholic faith than Orthodox or Protestants. Here's the problem, though. The closer you are, however, when you add an error mixed in with it that leads people away from Christ, the more dangerous you are. It's obvious the Orthodox don't profess to be in communion with the Pope. They outright reject the papacy as we understand it. Protestants do the same, and they're very clear in the fact that they're not identifying as the Roman Catholic Church. and they're not identifying as people in communion with the Holy See. They're very clear about that. So it's out in the obvious. It's very clear. If you know the truth about the papacy, you'll know that, okay, there's some problems with Orthodoxy and Protestantism. However, you can know the truth about the papacy and not spot some of the dangers of radical traditionalism. It's more pernicious, it's more subtle, but it's also more dangerous for that reason, because it's so easy to then confuse that with the proper understanding of the Catholic faith, with proper ecclesiology, with the proper understanding of the magisterium, because they're so close. But you have just a little drop of poison in there. It's so easy to think that the whole thing is good. It's a lot easier to see the errors of Orthodoxy and especially Protestantism. A lot easier to see that. But I also address Eastern Orthodox problems. I address Protestantism as well. But I'm more concerned in some ways about some aspects of radical traditionalism. And then I'm also more concerned about some problems with Eastern Orthodoxy and Protestantism than I am radical traditionalism. Just depends on what aspect we're talking about. But I'm not seeing a lot of people engaging the radical traditionalists and the misinformation that they're offering, and the content that is taking people away from Christ and his church. I'm not seeing people engaging that as much. So I'm seeing more of a need to address that. So again, I could understand why you would get that impression, but I don't think you've thought through this very clearly for the reasons that I've just mentioned. So here's something that was said to somebody who interviewed me. Thank you for interviewing Michael Loftus. It is helpful to hear a Catholic sophist string together statements of popes, councils, and theologians to support a naive clericalist interpretation of church governance. I'm certainly not a clericalist. I despise clericalism, to be honest with you. You know why? I've been a victim of it, so I personally greatly despise clericalism. I don't have a whole lot of good to say about clericalism, so let me maybe just stop there. I'm certainly not a clericalist. Nothing that I have said in that interview or just here promotes clericalism. And clericalism is this idea of superiority on part of the clergy over and against the laity. I despise that. But again, let me stop there. What I've said, however, is that we need to be obedient to the magisterium and to give assent where assent is due. This individual, interprets that as a naive clericalism and church governance. Upon what basis? I literally quoted in that interview the Council of Trent in Vatican I that offers an anathema against people that were opposing what I was saying. I was literally just repeating what Vatican I is calling us to, and it anathematizes people who deny it. So, I'm not imposing an anathema. Vatican I isn't imposing an anathema on people that would take this individual's understanding of ecclesiology. And so then upon what basis would one say that I'm wrong? Please show me that I've misinterpreted Vatican I or Trent or Pius XII that I also quoted. No engagement, of course, with anything I said, just slander. No engagement, though. That is always the case. To this day, I have not seen any real engagement on part of commenters with what I'm saying. I've seen, again, a lot of deflection, a lot of slander, a lot of rabbit trails that just completely don't address my position. They're fighting against a straw man, fighting against something I don't recognize as my position. But actually engaging Vatican I, Trent, and saying, okay, well, here's where you misunderstood the canon from Vatican I. Here's where you misunderstood this aspect from the chapters of the Council of Trent. And here's where you misunderstood Pius XII and Mediator Dei. I'm sorry, it wasn't Mediator Dei that I quoted from Pius XII. But here's where you misunderstood him. Here's what he meant. And here's how you can know. Here's what he meant. That would be helpful if I saw that. But there's no engagement like that with my work. And I then have to start asking, well, why is that? Why is that people can only resort to slander and straw men and deflection and rabbit trails rather than actually engaging the content? What does that say? It doesn't say that I'm right, but it does say that most people who are criticizing my content aren't in a position to interact with it. That's what it says. So again, it doesn't mean I'm right. It just means most people aren't in a position to show me where I'm wrong from what I'm seeing. That's all. And maybe those who are in that position just aren't commenting. I wish they would, because it'd be helpful for me to see, okay, if I'm mistaken, well, what is the proper interpretation of Vatican I or Trent or Pius XII and, Benedict XVI and others? Here's another. You are a viper, a wolf in sheep's clothing. This was in reference to a video that I did calling people to adhere to the magisterium. Imagine that. A person who is simply calling us to adhere to the magisterium is a wolf in sheep's clothing these days. What does that say about us when we think that adhering to the magisterium is, being a viper, a wolf in sheep's clothing? Well, that says that you're in a way outside of communion with the Catholic Church. And maybe you don't even realize it. You think that you're in communion with the church, but it's not the church that exists in history right now. It's a church that exists in your mind. If you're to the point that you think that you can reject the magisterium of the Catholic Church, but you're still Catholic, I would say that you're probably not going to be Catholic for long. I mean, I would already say you're in some ways you're not Catholic. According to canon law, you're not. If you start rejecting the magisterium, you can't, in good conscience, identify as a Catholic. But a person who thinks this is still going to think that they're Catholic. But what I'm saying is, you're not even going to be that for very long. It's only a matter of time before you're out the door and you'll go somewhere else. Which a lot of these people already are out the door. I'm just saying. It's sad when we get to the point that following the magisterium makes you a modernist. Yes, I am called that because I follow the magisterium and I defend the magisterium. I'm a modernist. And I'm called this by people who claim to be traditional Catholics. Imagine that. Traditional Catholicism in their mind is in dissent from the magisterium. When has it ever historically been a good idea to dissent from the magisterium? When? I'd love to know. The few instances that I've seen are not good instances that are not engaging what I'm saying. So usually it's the people who are in dissent against the magisterium that end up being the ones who are on the wrong side of history. Just FYI. Here's another interesting one. Stop being a coward and debate Taylor Marshall. Are you under the impression that I wouldn't debate him? And are you under the impression that Taylor Marshall is willing to debate? Again, are you under the impression that Taylor Marshall has discussions with people who oppose his views? And are you under the impression that I don't have discussions with people who oppose my views? Look at my track record and then just go watch Taylor Marshall's video. The only time I've ever seen him have a disagreement with somebody was over a minor issue. And it was with Eric Sammons on some trivial issue. It wasn't an actual video debating something substantial. Now, go and compare that to my track history, if you've actually looked into it, which I don't think you have. Am I willing to have a dialogue with Dr. Taylor Marshall? Absolutely. He's welcome on the show. He's always been welcome on the show. I'm willing to come on his show and we can talk about our differences in a charitable way. I've always been willing to do that. Or it could even be a third party channel. But again, I have no problem just going on his channel. That doesn't matter. I'm willing to dialogue with anybody who is of goodwill and who can behave charitably, period. They can be an atheist. They can be a Muslim. They can be a Mormon. My track history or track record shows that. Those are my only conditions. You have goodwill you're charitable, and those kind of go in hand. I mean, how's it possible to really have, I guess it's possible to have goodwill and be uncharitable. So let me just continue with those two qualifications. You have to be of goodwill. So you can't have, it can't be obvious that you have bad intentions. You have to honestly have goodwill insofar as you want to have a good discussion. And then number two, you're going to behave charitably. You're not going to start cussing. You're not going to start slandering. You're going to stick to the topic, and we're going to address the issues. As long as we have that, that's fine. We can have a discussion. I might not agree with you. I might even think that your position is leading people away from Christ. And you might think the same about me. I understand. And you know what? What if you're right? I need to know. So I'll consider your opinion. I'll consider your perspective, but I need to see some solid evidence and support for one's claims. If I'm the one who's wrong on some of these things, I just need to see that demonstrated. But I've had plenty of people on the show who would believe that I send people to hell with my content. I don't think that's the case. If I did, I wouldn't say the things I'm saying, but I'll hear them out. Doesn't mean I'll be convinced, but I'll hear them out. And I would just hope that they would do the same for me. Let's see. Let me look through the chat. Like I said, that's just a fraction of just some of the comments that have come in, but I figured it'd be helpful to address some of it. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. Make sure to put them to @Reason and Theology. And by the way, you'll notice on almost every show I answer live chat questions, and I generally can't screen them in advance, so I kind of find out what the question is while I'm reading it, which is a little dangerous. That could backfire, right? But I mean, I don't have a screener, so it just is. It is what it is. But you'll notice that does show at least that I'm intending. I have good intentions. And so far as I'll engage people who oppose what I'm saying and offer a different perspective, I'll answer those questions. I'll engage those. That should at least show that I intend well. I might not be right, but it at least shows my intentions are to engage with people and to be fair and to hear what they have to say. Okay. My question is, what's your preferred apologetic method in evangelizing atheists or other world beliefs? I really think that showing the content or the arguments that Aquinas used to establish the existence of God goes a long way. That doesn't go all the way, obviously. Whenever a person accepts, a generic deity that Aquinas' 5 proofs would demonstrate, you have to go beyond that and to the Trinity. So I understand that there's more to it than that, but I do appreciate Aquinas and his content here. I found it to be helpful for myself. Michael's content has always been extremely helpful and insightful. I appreciate it. Thank you. Why are so many Rad Trads anti-Semitic and racist? That's a great question, because I've noticed that as well. I don't have a good answer for you there, because I don't think that they should be. Perhaps you'll notice that there are some common characteristics among radical traditionalists. You'll notice one of their characteristics is reactionary. It's not nuanced. It's not very well educated either. Not every radical traditionalist. Some of them are educated, but I'm just saying on the whole, there's a lot of people who are incredibly ignorant and they're reactionary. Those are just general characteristics that you tend to see, not always, but just generally speaking here with that crowd. Might they be reacting against some things that they've seen, where the media has pushed certain agendas and they're just reacting against it without being nuanced? Might that be the case? Might they be ignorant about what Scripture teaches about this area? Perhaps. Might they fail to make certain distinctions between some things that happened in the first century compared to what our approach would be today, perhaps. But isn't that the problem to begin with? An inability to make nuances, ignorance, certain character flaws. Isn't that the problem anyway? Isn't that already why they tend to gravitate to radical traditional theories of the church? Again, that doesn't speak for everyone, but I'm just painting with a broad brush here. Appreciate your engagement in the chat, Michael, even though you call me out sometimes. God bless. I don't know what I called you out for, but I apologize if it was uncharitable. I have no idea what that was. I'm sorry if that was wrong. Let's see. Even in his death, Father Chikata's media still takes misinformed Catholics to Rad Tradism. Maybe you could refute some of his videos or articles. Yeah, I'm open to it. But I don't know what you're referring to. Takes misinformed Catholics to Rad Tradism. Are you saying that his content leads to radical traditionalism? Let's see. I'm seeing some questions that are relevant to today's topic. Maybe hold those for whenever I do an Ask Me Anything. Would you personally love to see more content on Sedevacantism? It's one of the most interesting topics to me and seems... you're saying would personally love. In other words, you would like to see more content on Sedevacantism. It's one of the most interesting topics to me and seems to be left largely unanswered in the mainstream. It's because it's so small. Now, I understand it is growing. But you might say, well, radical traditionalism is so small. Not really. I think they're significantly growing. But yeah, perhaps Sedevacantism is also growing. So yeah, I mean, I'm willing to. Why can't we all just get along? Let's see. Your hair doesn't look bad, but you should go back to the bald look. Everyone's a critic. Let's see. I also noticed that the Rad Trads hide behind their screen and keyboards and not say it face to face. Well, I certainly think that they wouldn't say those things face to face in the vast majority of cases. And you're right. A lot of them engage in different, screen names and hide behind anonymity. That should say something about the people. You Vatican II hippie, how dare you defend Vical Maftius Maximus for shame. That's great. Haley says, was Michael asking for beauty tips? How can you help people who are leaning to Buddhism because of the scandals in the church? I think that Buddhism, insofar as I understand, would not have a proper worldview, especially when it comes to an explanation of the world. I would once again point you to the 5 proofs of Thomas Aquinas. I'd like to see some Buddhist engagements of that, because I think that it disproves their worldview. What else? Hey, Michael, I saw some Orthodox critiques of some of the discussions with Father Price, saying he made their point by saying the East never accepted the papacy. What might be your thoughts on the matter? I thought that Eric Ibarra responded very well to that, did he not? Which is why I didn't bother to engage it. Those people who select certain comments from Father Price also didn't pay attention to what else Father Price said, which is not in their favor. Let me find where Eric responded to this, because I don't have anything else to add to what he said here. I thought that was sufficient. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe start with this. Eric Ibarra .org on April 5th, 2022. Reverend Dr. Richard Price speaks on papal authority and the Byzantine reception in the first millennium. Which side stands to gain? Read that article. And then if you have further questions, ask those to me. Until then, I think he offered a death nail to that whole nonsense to begin with, because I do think it was silly. Okay. I think Michael promotes a healthy balance of holding to a traditional Catholic outlook without the excesses of Dr. Marshall. You do good work, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, are you kidding me? Under this Pope, radical traditionalism is becoming more vocal. Well, yeah, I think it makes sense, right? I mean, people are, again, they're unsure how to properly respond to some difficulties with Pope Francis, and so they go to excess. It's clear why in this pontificate people have grown to radical traditionalism. It's obvious. The question is what we're hearing from radical traditionalism a proper response to the difficulties with the current pontificate? I would say no. I would say there's better ways to handle the difficulties with the current pontificate. What is a rad trad? I answered that earlier in the video. Please watch the whole thing. Let's see. Why can't we all get along? Original sin. Yeah. And also personal sins, I think, factors into this as well. So this is a popular Rad Trad talking point, religious liberty and the apparent contradictions we now have with the topic. How would you explain the positions on religious liberty? Well, number one, watch my video with Dr. Pink on religious liberty. Then watch my video with Dr. Lawrence Jerome King on the issue of Vatican II, religious liberty and assent to the magisterium. And then number three, watch my video just recently on religious liberty. Let me pull it up, because I just did it a few weeks ago, was it? Again, my perception of time is not always accurate, so it may not have been a few weeks ago. It may have been a little longer than that. Let's see. Yeah, it was 1 month ago. Okay. Religious liberty, continuity, or reversal with Dr. Michael Dunningen. So go and watch that video, and you'll have your answer. It's not something you can answer very quickly. Would you consider Father James Altman to be in some of the same vein as radical traditionalism as Taylor Marshall? Do you think some of his ideas lead people from God? I certainly have some concerns about Father James Altman. That doesn't mean that everything he says is wrong. I mean, there might be some things I agree with, but there's also some things I agree with Taylor Marshall and others on. It's just, there's still some content in there that I think undermines it. So, some of these heretics throughout history, and I'm not saying they're heretics, I'm just trying to give an example from history. Some heretics throughout history, Apollinarius, for example, there's a whole lot of things that they said was true, and they were trying to react against heresies. Apollinarius formulated his position in reaction against Arius. He was trying to fight Arianism. So a lot of these people had good motives, but then they adopt something that's also harmful. But not everything that they said was wrong. There were some things that Apollinarius was trying to get at that was helpful and true, but then it wasn't all the way true, and it was that grain of non-truth that becomes harmful. So there's a lot of people today who are reacting against legitimate problems in the church. It's just they're reacting with solutions that are harmful and are not entirely true. Do you think charismaticism poses a threat to the faith? Some forms of it, most certainly. Some forms of it. Depends on also what we mean. But I think I know what you mean by the term. Yeah, certainly some forms of it. Not the authentic gifts of the Holy Spirit properly exercised in the church. Traditionally understood, but I suspect that's not what you mean. Let's see. Would you recommend any specific books or videos for friends who are falling into a problematic radical traditionalism? I have a whole playlist. It's just under traditional Catholicism playlist. So maybe watch that, because I'm comparing and contrasting Rad Trad with traditional Catholicism. Maybe start there. Just curious, but is there a more specific term for modernism than just modernism, with the context for the traditionalists is just enlightenment thinking, or what? It's more than just enlightenment thinking, but certainly enlightenment did lead to modernism as properly defined. You know, the late 19th, early 20th century phenomenon with figures like Tyrrell and Lavoisier, among others. Enlightenment certainly led to that. But is it distinct from the Enlightenment? Yes, because some Enlightenment thinkers just weren't even Christian at all. They were throwing off all dogma and all forms of tradition. Whereas modernism wasn't necessarily saying we're throwing off Christianity and tradition. The problem is they were substituting definitions for tradition and dogma. So they would define the deity of Christ, you know, as something other than what it actually is. And that's the problem. They would say, yeah, I believe the creed, but then they redefine what the creed means, every article in it. So it's like, you say that you affirm tradition, but you're redefining all your terms. That's the problem of modernism. Is that what people are doing today? Not exactly. That's why I would call it, at best, neo-modernism, because they're not exactly defining terms in the creed. They're trying to undermine the doctrine by disciplines that are contrary to the doctrine. It's a little more subtle. Now, some of them do actually just deny dogmas, and in that case, it's heresy. It's not necessarily modernism. Might you have some who are actually modernists who would say, I believe in the articles of the creed, and they redefine what the creed means? Might you have that? You might, but that doesn't tend to be the problem. It tends to be that some people are just rejecting articles of the creed or aspects of the faith. They're just rejecting it entirely, or they're saying, I hold to it as far as a concept, but I'm going to now have a discipline that's completely contrary to it. That's a little different than modernism. It's not the same thing. I'm in none of those categories, though. I'm not doing any of that. So in no way would it be fair to call me a modernist. Let's see. Grow a beard like Maximilian Kolbe. Okay. I was agreeing with an earlier statement you said about Rad Trads becoming more popular. Okay, cool. I appreciate the clarification. He says, I don't agree that they are correct. Okay, good. I think there is a super chat. Let me grab that. $10.54. I think we know why, but I appreciate the super chat, by the way. It's important to me about so many high-profile Catholics, apologists like Horn and Frad going to the Byzantine liturgy. It's not scandalous per se, but feels a bait and switch of defending Roman Catholics and Novus Ordo. No. Do you hear what you're saying? It's not a bait and switch. Are you really under the impression that somebody in the Eastern Rite can't accurately criticize or assess the Roman Rite? Is that really your perspective? See, this is the kind of stuff I just don't understand. I would welcome somebody in the Roman Rite criticizing certain aspects in the Eastern Catholic Church. We don't section off individuals in the Catholic Church and say, you're no longer allowed to say something about here. Somebody who attends the Eastern liturgy is still capable of accurately and correctly assessing the Roman Rite, and the other way around. So it's this kind of critique that I just don't find helpful. But I do appreciate the super chat and the opportunity to clarify there. Let's see. So no, I let me also be clear about them specifically. I don't think Horn or Frad are being disingenuous. I don't think it's scandalous for them to criticize some aspects about the Roman Rite and go to an Eastern liturgy. I don't think that that's a problem. What you're effectively saying is they're not capable of criticizing some aspects of the Roman Rite because they don't attend a Roman Rite liturgy. Upon what basis do you make that claim? Let's see. Frad goes to the Latin Rite, hasn't been to a Byzantine Rite in 2 years almost. And that's fine. But what if he did go to something in the Eastern Rite? What does that have to do with comments about the Roman Rite? It's not that you lose somehow an ability to accurately think or express your thoughts if you go to one form of the liturgy or another. I've had some people on who are in the Roman Rite that would criticize some aspects of the East. We're a church, we're united as one, and we don't just section each other off to where we just say you stay in your corner and you can't say anything about anyone else outside of your corner. I think that's the wrong mentality of the church. Let's see. Okay, so I think that some Catholics felt there had been a push for the Eastern Catholics and are afraid that the Western Rite is being thrown under the bus. Maybe that is a concern. But you know what? Are there not fair criticisms of the Roman Rite? And are there not aspects of the Eastern liturgies that might be more ideal than the Roman Rite? I maintain that. And yet I can still say, whether I'm in the Roman Rite or not, I can still say everything that I'm saying. And I was still saying those when I was a part of the Roman Rite. I was still saying the same thing. Because it doesn't reflect these issues when we speak about them objectively don't change because of which liturgy you attend. But might we say that there are some problems with the Roman Rite itself? And when we say problems here, not problems of something evil, but there are some innovative aspects to the Roman Rite. There's some innovations to the Roman Rite. I think that that's obvious. I think it's obvious withholding communion from infants is an innovation. Withholding chrismation from infants is an innovation. Was it understandable how the Roman Rite developed to that? Yeah. Is it evil that the Roman Rite developed that way? No, it's not. Is it ideal? I don't think so. I don't think so. I would just say it's a difference between good versus best. I don't think it's ideal. There are some aspects to the Roman Rite I don't think are ideal. That doesn't have anything to do with what I'm saying about whether or not the Novus Ordo is as properly promulgated, whether or not it's harmful to souls. I can still say that, regardless of what liturgy I go to or someone else. And yeah, even if there is a concern of people who are leaving the Roman Rite for Eastern Catholicism, I would maybe share some of those concerns. My question is, why are you going to Eastern Catholicism? Are you going to Eastern Catholicism to flee the Roman Rite? I have some concerns there. So if somebody goes to the Roman Rite to flee, leaves the Roman Rite to one of the Eastern Catholic churches to flee the Roman liturgy or something like that, I would question that. I would say, but have you actually understood properly the Roman Rite? Are you fleeing abuses, or have you concluded that the Roman Rite in and of itself is harmful to souls? That's my concern. Now, if you say, I just think that Eastern Catholicism is more ideal liturgically than the Roman Rite, but I don't think that the Roman Rite is harmful to souls. Okay. Or if you say, I think that the Roman Rite in my area is just not done properly, so I find the Eastern liturgy is done properly in my area, so that's why I go to the Roman Rite. Okay, that's fine. But I do have some concerns. Give me 1 second here. I hear my son at the doors. Let me check on him for one moment, and I'll come right back and answer a few more questions. All right. All was well. Took that opportunity to grab me some coffee here. So sorry about that. Let's see. But yeah, to finish that, I do have concerns about some people who go from Roman Rite to Eastern Catholicism. The question is why? What are your intentions? That could be problematic, and the other way around. There are some people who go from Eastern Catholicism to the Roman Rite, and I would also question what are the motives there as well. Why do you think other Catholic YouTubers do not address Rad Tradism on the same level that you do? It could be that for some of them, it's just kind of not their thing. They're more proficient in other areas, and that's fine. Not everybody has to talk about the same thing. Obviously, there's some things that I engage that others don't, and things that they engage better than I do, and that's fine. I'm not saying everybody has to address the same thing. I just wish that there were more who were addressing Rad Trad. So, but again, that's not a slight on other YouTubers. I'm trying to say that everybody has their thing. Everybody kind of has their lane. That's understandable. I just wish there were more people who had the lane of engaging radical traditionalism. That's all. But you know what? They feel the same way. They wish that there were more people engaging their area too. Fair enough. I try to be balanced and engaged in everything, but obviously I'm going to end up having more focuses than other areas, right? So, everybody's going to feel like I wish there was more interaction in this area. For me, however, I don't enjoy addressing radical traditionalism. I'm not really interested in it. I don't like it. It comes with a group of very toxic people. So I just don't enjoy being around it and dealing with it and having to interact with the people that tend to gravitate in that crowd, since they often tend to be slanderous and very toxic. Not always, but there's enough of them for me to feel like I feel like I just swam through a sewer or something after having to deal with this. That's what I'm saying. I don't personally enjoy it or like it, but if there's nobody else that's addressing it, I have to address it. Frankly, I'd rather talk about other things. Let's see, there's a super chat. Let me grab it. Those super chats help out, by the way. They really do. Because maybe you don't know it, but YouTube doesn't really give a whole lot for monetization of videos. It's unless you have like 300,000 subs or something, and you're getting, crazy views. You're not really getting much from YouTube for monetization. So it's more channel membership, patrons, super chats. That's more where, a person is able to earn more of an income. So I appreciate it. Y'all know that this is my means of providing for my family, that I'm no longer working my day job, that I'm doing this full time. So I appreciate the support that y'all are offering, and the super chats and the subscribers and sharing it on your social media to spread the word. I really do appreciate that. So let's see. Dude just debate Taylor Marshall on your channel. Geez, so uncharitable. I'm kidding, of course. Can't donate too often, but count on my prayers. I appreciate that. Thank you. And that's fine. Look, if you can't financially support me, I understand. I've been there before myself. Most people don't know, just about financial situations or things like that I've lived through, but I've been to the point where you can't afford, $1 a day, that even that is out of your budget. So I totally understand that. I would just simply ask if that's you, if you're in that situation, to pray for me and to share it on your social media. I mean, those are generally things that you can do, even if, supporting me is out of the budget. You can still help share things on social media. You can hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and you can also pray for me that I would not be an offense against Christ, that I would not be a scandal to Christ, that I would not lead people away from him. Pray to that end. And that really goes a long way. Thank you, Gabe, for the super chat. Hey, Michael, this may be helpful to understand the radical traditionalists. Most are converts, usually at great personal cost. Yep. When they enter the church, they feel that they are rejected for their love of the faith. That's understandable. It's completely understandable. And I'm not entirely unsympathetic to radical traditionalists because they're concerned about true problems sometimes in the church. Sometimes it's misinformation that they're operating on, so it's not actually a problem. Sometimes it's a lack of catechesis and a deficiency in their understanding, so they're not properly assessing the situation. But sometimes there are legitimate problems that they're being confronted with in the church. So I'm not entirely unsympathetic to that. I recognize that. I've lived through that. I'm a convert myself. I understand their mentality, what they're thinking, what their level of knowledge is in the area. I've been there. I've lived through that. I can understand that. My concern is whether or not the things that they're buying into is the solution to the crisis. That's my concern. What's the proper solution? Because we all agree there's problems in the church. We all agree there's a crisis. How do we accurately assess that crisis? And what is our proper response to that crisis? That's what I'm concerned about. And I don't think what I'm hearing from most radical traditionalists is a proper assessment of the situation. I think oftentimes they're mischaracterizing the situation, overselling it, and then also overshooting in their correction of it in response to it. But yeah, I hear where you're coming from. I think there's some more super chats. Thank you, Glenn Rogers, for the super sticker there. I think there's another one. Chris Isley, Michael, have you seen any videos by Rabbi Tovia Singer critiquing Christianity? The New Testament would like to see you do a review. Yeah, the Protestant Michael Brown has engaged him. I asked him a while back to come on the show, and he gave me some really absurd response about how he'll only have a discussion with me if I come to Israel and film it in Israel. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm in the United States. I mean, I can't afford to come to Israel. Can you just meet me on YouTube? I mean, we have video conferencing now. You don't have to fly all the way out to Jerusalem. To me, it just seemed like he was doing that because he knows I can't come to Israel. Just say that you're not interested instead of giving me this, impossible condition. But yeah, can I interact with some of his videos still? Yeah, sure, of course. If you can email me a particular one, that would be good. Maybe one also that Michael Brown hasn't already addressed. Most RTs love Christ and his church. Okay, radical traditionalists love Christ and his church. They feel adrift and abused by the outside world, and then again, when in the modern church. That's somewhat true. I think that there are a lot of people who are in the Rad Trad camp who do love Christ and his church. I think there are some in that camp who don't love Christ and don't love his church, and they only gravitate to it for other reasons. And I know that because I see it in their behavior. It's not Christ and his church that they love. It's a idol that they've created in their mind. That's not descriptive of everybody who is a radical traditionalist. I'm just saying that there's some who are radical traditionalists that I don't think love Christ and his church. I think they love an idol they've created in their mind. But there are the people that you're also talking about who do truly love Christ and his church. I think that was me when I was radical traditionalist. I think that I actually loved Christ and his church, but I maintained radical traditionalist view. So I think that's who I would identify with when I was a radical traditionalist. And yes, they do feel adrift and abused. And some of that is partly legitimate. I mean, we are ostracized by the world. We are sometimes abused by the world. We're then even abused by some in the church. I know I've experienced that personally. So I totally understand. My concern is, but what's the solution? What I'm hearing is not a solution. It's adding to the problem. And sometimes what I'm hearing isn't even an accurate assessment of the situation in the church to begin with. That's also problematic because there's a spreading of misinformation. That's doing more harm than good. So I totally understand where you're coming from, though. think there's some more super chats. Jess, thank you for the super chat. You mentioned preferring to deal with other topics. What are the topics you'd like to cover in the future? I would just like to talk more about the magisterium and just how it works. I mean, that's something I prefer to talk about, but obviously that's not necessarily going to be something that everybody is interested in. And you have to keep it diverse. You can't just do the same thing. I like talking about the papacy in the first millennium. I like talking about just ecclesiology in general in the first millennium. I like talking about the church fathers. Those are things I like. So I think that those would be things that I would prefer if I had a choice, but sometimes I don't always have a choice. Sometimes I have to address things that I don't like. Sorry, it is off topic. And by the way, also talking about Eastern Catholicism and some of the, beauty there, and some of the reasons why I think that we should consider Eastern Catholicism for the right reasons, however. Let's see. Sorry if off topic, but can you, in short and direct, explain the development of doctrine that occurred with the update in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, death penalty? Thank you for the super chat. I did this in detail in 2 videos, and I'll give you a short answer now, but you're going to need to watch these videos to get the nitty gritty and the details. So first, the original video is going to be where I'm engaging the primary sources. So the first video engaging the primary sources is going to be, let me share my screen, this one. Did the Pope change the church's teaching on the death penalty? You're going to need to start there because that's where I'm engaging, again, the primary sources, which in this discussion would be the actual revision to the catechism, the documents behind the revision, stuff like that. You'll want to watch that one first, and then you'll want to watch this one I did a week ago, Pope Francis and the death penalty. It's a part 2, if you will. Do those, and then what I'm about to say you'll see where I've shown my work. Right now I can give you the math solution, the the answer to the math question. But if you need to see me where I'm showing the work, go to those videos. Okay, so the quick answer is there's 2 things. There is a development of doctrine, and there's also a different disciplinary application to this development. Number 1, the development to doctrine is not on the death penalty. The development is on our understanding of the dignity of the human person. We've become more aware of it. That's the development. The application of that in light of our current situation today, which may or may not be accurate. In other words, we might not be assessing our current situation today, namely how the penal system works in today's society and in all places. But taking that development of doctrine and then applying it to our current situation, the Holy Father is going to say it's inadmissible, not intrinsically evil, but inadmissible. That again would hinge on whether or not he's accurately assessing our current situation with the penal system and then taking that doctrine and applying it in a disciplinary way prudentially. We might offer some pushback on whether or not this has been, as far as a discipline, prudentially applied correctly based on whether or not he's accurately assessed the situation of our penal system. But again, it's not that doctrine has changed. There is a different doctrine that has developed, but it hasn't been reversed. And the doctrine that has been developed is not the death penalty itself. The doctrine that has been developed is the dignity of the human person. That's the short answer. It's a disciplinary issue. It's not a change in doctrine. That's what it boils down to. But you'll need to watch those 2 videos where I show my work. Thank you, Michael Joseph, for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Let's see. Any videos on the specific boundaries of oral tradition would be good. I think it's easy for Catholics to not give a good explanation and make the magisterium sound spurious. Yeah. Well, I've done some videos, but this touches on multiple areas. Identifying sacred tradition. I'm going to continue to mention him, but Duranzo's Channels of Revelation. Emmanuel Duranzo, Channels of Revelation, the last English manualist. Read him. Thomist, writing after the Second Vatican Council and taking it into account. Showing, by the way, that Vatican II is consistent with the manualist tradition. You're going to want to read that. And then, of course, issues dealing with material sufficiency, Gabriel, Moran, scripture and tradition, or any of my videos on tradition or on material sufficiency. Those are all relevant here. Okay. Wrapping it up here. Can you repeat your definition of radical traditionalism? I know you said it earlier, but it would be helpful to hear it in context of all these discussions. So radical traditionalism, just simply defined, is going to be a form that adheres to certain liturgical practices over and against the magisterium. It adheres to certain ecclesial traditions over and against sacred tradition and confuses them. It confuses ecclesial tradition with sacred tradition. It thinks that those are identifiable, and they're not. They're not the same thing. Maybe you'll go and watch my video on the different kinds of traditions. I go over about 11 different ways in which we can speak about tradition, and they conflate those things. So again, it confuses certain aspects that came after the apostles, certain ecclesial traditions. It confuses them with sacred tradition, and it puts those ecclesial traditions over sacred tradition because it thinks that those ecclesial traditions are sacred tradition. That's effectively how I would define radical traditionalism. There are other aspects to it. I mean, obviously, under this idea now is going to be a dissent from the magisterium, because if you think that an ecclesial tradition is identified with sacred tradition itself, well, whenever the church adjusts some aspect of ecclesial tradition, you're going to think it's adjusting sacred tradition itself. And now you're going to fight against the magisterium because the magisterium is fighting against sacred tradition. So it's going to come with other things, right? So we can unpack that definition and other things that follow from it. But it's going to be generally in dissent from the magisterium, reactionary against Vatican II, reactionary against anything the Pope ever says, an idea that thinks that I can completely reject third paragraph teachings and be in good standing with the church, and I don't have good reasons for doing so other than my own private judgment. I can go on, but I think that's really what it boils down to, a dissent from the magisterium because it confuses certain liturgical and ecclesial traditions with sacred tradition itself. Perhaps I could think of a better definition if I just thought about it a little more, but I think that we know what I'm talking about when I'm describing it. Okay, thank you for the super chat. Gosh, this is totally off topic, and I'm sure I know the answer. Do you think it is permissible to attend a so-called gay wedding? As a Catholic, I have a priest in my area who encourages it. I don't think that that's a good prudential decision, because when you say gay wedding, I guess you're talking about something that happens outside of the Catholic Church, but this Catholic priest is encouraging such things. Well, I'd really question whether or not that Catholic priest is in good standing with the church. And now, obviously, as far as his office, holding office as a priest or something, I'm not saying that he's lost any of that. I'm not saying that his sacraments aren't valid. I'm just saying that I don't think he's internally in good standing with the church whenever you advocate things like that. But I can't necessarily read the level of a person's culpability or something like that. But objectively, that doesn't look good. Now, do you think it's permissible to attend a gay wedding? I wouldn't, because I think that prudentially you'd have to have a really good reason for attending it. And I don't think that I can't think of any good reasons offhand. Speak to a really good moral theologian and tell them about your situation and see if they're going to say that there's good enough reason to attend such things. In my opinion, there's probably not good enough reason. It would probably be imprudent. Okay. Thank you for. Well, I think I already thanked you, Michael, for the super sticker. But just in case I didn't, thank you for the super sticker. Okay. You cannot be a witness to a sinful ceremony. Well, I think they're talking about attendance rather than being a witness to the actual ceremony as far as participating in it. I think they're just talking about passively attending. But I don't think there's a good reason to even passively attend. So it's a good question. Anything else? Well, I think that's going to do it. We're at 1 hour and a half, so we'll end it there. I appreciate y'all watching, supporting me. Thank y'all so much for the super chats. I hope this has been helpful. I hope I've been charitable. Again, I hope I haven't been an offense. So continue to pray for me. Continue to pray for what we're doing here. If you believe in what we're doing, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share it on your social media. And if you want to support me financially, in addition to, super stickers, super chats, memberships, gift memberships for others, maybe consider becoming a member of the channel, or, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/reason and theology, or consider, getting my course on the magisterium. It's at maximusinstitute.com. If you want to learn more about understanding how the teaching authority of the church works, maybe get that course. Again, it's maximusinstitute.com. The course is called Understanding the Magisterium. It's currently available for $39.99 one-time purchase, and you'll always have access to the lectures, and you can download the MP4 of them as well. It goes a long way in supporting me and my family. And also it's a course, like I said, on the magisterium. So it'll just help you understand how teaching authority works. Thank you for the super chat here, Chris. What if it happens to be a brother? It's so sad. I understand. Maybe email me privately, because I can certainly give you some personal advice there. But just it being a family member, personally, I don't think that in my conscience I could attend such a thing, even if it's just a family member. That's where I am in my conscience. Might you explain your situation further to a moral theologian who's a good one, and they might give you some examples where it would be permitted to attend such a thing, perhaps, but I can't think of any good reason. I personally, I'm not an expert in moral theology, but I can't think of any good reason to attend such a thing, family member notwithstanding. I just think it would be imprudent. I think you're giving the wrong signal there. And I would think that that's different than attending something like an Orthodox wedding or something like that. They're not in the same category. So again, thank you for the super chat there. But once again, consider supporting me in those ways that I mentioned. And I really appreciate it. Like I said, pray for me. Pray for the content on the channel. And I think that's going to do it. See y'all later. God bless. Oh, wait, before you go, I would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting this channel. This is my primary means to provide for my family, and it also helps me to produce content like this video. If you would like to support me, become a patron by visiting patreon.com/reason and theology. You'll also get access to extra exclusive content when you become a patron. Lastly, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and be sure to leave a comment down below. God bless.